I'm Sal Sawler, the author of Ellis On Guard from Second Story Press, and this is the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Sal Sawler about the new picture book Ellis On Guard from Second Story Press. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Sal Sawler is a former journalist and graphic novel editor, as well as an educator and children's author living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Their early books were shortlisted for the Forest of Reading and Hackmatack and earned a Moonbeam Children's Book Award. Their debut picture book, When the Ocean Came to Town, was featured on CBC Canada Kids Reads. Sal's newest picture book is entitled Ellis On Guard, illustrated by Nandita Ratan. The story of Ellis On Guard goes like this. Ellis sees danger in places other people don't. They worry about talking to new people, and they're especially worried about losing their puppy, Peanut. If Ellis wrote out their list of worries, it would wrap around their house 3 times. But sometimes our worries can be put to surprisingly good use. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Sal Sawler about the new picture book Ellis On Guard from Second Story Press. So, Sal Sawler, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
I appreciate your time. We've met up at a variety of different festivals and conventions, but this is the first time we've done an interview, so I apologize for the tardiness.
Oh, no, I love your podcast, so I'm honored to be here, whether it's now or earlier or later. It's all good.
Well, thank you very much. Before I get going to all the questions, though, I would like to know, what was the first comic book that you read?
You know what? I actually don't remember the first comic book that I read. I can tell you the first graphic novel. So I started out with comic strips. I was I'm in my 40s, so I was a Saturday morning comics person. So I remember pulling the comic sheets out of the paper and reading those every weekend, like For Better, For Worse and all those ones. So that was a part of my earlier years. Then I got really into Far Side for a while. And then my first graphic novel that I read was Persepolis, which just turned everything I thought comics could be on their head. And then I read V for Vendetta, and then it was just, I was gone from there.
That's great stuff. Very inspirational for sure. But I'm wondering, who or what inspires you to create today?
Honestly, if I didn't create, I don't know what I would do with the ideas in my head. I have ideas all the time, so I need an outlet for them, first of all. But I pick up inspiration from all kinds of little things. I might just read a snippet of a book, or I might hear a bit of a poem, or I might hear somebody just talking about something they're frustrated with. One thing, though, that I've found really inspiring lately, and I think that this may influence where things start to go next, is just being so immersed in the zine community in terms of going to all these festivals you just mentioned. I went to the Halifax Book Fair a few months ago, and just looking around there and seeing all the things that people are making with their hands, I found so inspiring, because I've heard from a lot of people that they're really wanting to turn back to tactile things lately. And I think it's because we're just so overwhelmed by technology right now, that the idea of just playing with paper and using my typewriter and writing things, I want to make art objects right now. So I don't know, when we have to see when my education degree is done. But really, it's other people's work that really inspires me. And it's not anyone in particular. It's just snippets that come from everywhere. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very cool. In fact, I've been hearing from other creators too that this year more people are trying to go analog and get away from screens. So I get you. Absolutely. Makes sense. So we're here talking about your latest picture book called Ellis On Guard. I wonder if you could describe the book.
Ellis is a child who has a lot of anxiety, a lot of big worries, as we say in the book. In fact, they have so many worries that if they wrote them all down, they'd wrap around their house 3 times. They also have a beloved puppy named Peanut. The story begins when Ellis is walking down the street one day and sees a lost dog's poster on a pole and starts overthinking, as a lot of people with anxiety, I do as well, start to do. You catastrophize, right? turned a mountain into a molehill, right? They start thinking, what if somebody takes Peanut to New York, to Nepal, maybe to Neptune? And then on second thought, Ellis says, oh, maybe that might be a little bit too much. So they start thinking about ways to protect Peanut, which requires them to build a dog napper trap. But to build the dog napper trap, they have to go and collect materials. And to collect those materials, they have to overcome a fear each time. And so they go through that process. They get help at certain points. At one point, Peanut gives them a little push. And they use various coping strategies that I'm hoping that young readers and their parents might also pick up if needed. And in the end, they manage to build this trap, and they actually end up saving the neighbor's lost dog because through their anxiety, they've started noticing a lot of things that other people don't notice because they're so hypervigilant, right? They're noticing things all the time in case there's something bad happening. And this ends up actually helping somebody. So what I really want to highlight is the fact that we all have anxiety. That's often healthy. Some of us have elevated levels of it that get in the way, but we can live with it often. There's ways to manage it. And I also want to mention that it's not always entirely bad. We do develop some skills that we might not have had otherwise.
All right. Very good. Was there any specific type of inspiration, something that sparked your interest to create your story?
This is actually the seed of a story that's been bouncing around for a long time. It started out as kind of a shadow version of itself. And the tentative title at the time was It's a Trap. Because I don't know. I think I had that reference from, was it Star Trek? I can't remember. Anyways. And it was basically I didn't have the anxiety element in there, which is something that I bring in personally. And I also did not have Ellis as a non-binary character. So that was a choice I made later too. Yeah, I just had this idea of a character having to go around and build this trap. And the piece that was originally in it, there's this funny little part where they start accidentally catching their dad and the robotic vacuum cleaner. And so that's the part that I had originally. And then it eventually snowballed and I guess solidified into this. But that's how my stories happen. I have all these little bits and pieces that just turn into something. I might have an idea for a picture book forming over the course of 2 years, and then I'll write it out over 3 weeks. But the little bits and pieces are kind of bubbling up in there.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I was originally questioned about why we should be chatting about your book because it's not a graphic novel. That's something that you've helped promote in the past. But a creator once told me that a picture book is just a younger version of the graphic novel. So I want to get your insight. What do you think about that?
I'd 100% agree. So in addition to promoting books for Conundrum, I also founded Emanata, which is the young adult imprint over there. So I also edit graphic novels. I brought a lot of that into this picture book in particular. Readers will notice that there are some word bubbles here and there. I also paid close attention to not overtelling. I believe strongly that within picture books, as with graphic novels, that storytelling job is shared. My job is the words. I do share part of that story arc and how that's going to develop, but I don't want everything written out that's also going to be shown on paper. And that's the same way with graphic novels. It has to be a balanced experience, a shared experience between the writer and the artist. And I think the reader expects that as well. Otherwise we're spoon feeding them. So I think that's very similar. But again, as I mentioned, I also use some similar elements like word bubbles and captions and things like that. It's a little bit different in that we don't have panels. That's probably the biggest difference. And of course, the length. But comics are short, although that would be a whole other debate between comics and graphic novels. But yeah, there are a lot of similarities. It's still sequential art.
Cool. It's been said that you should always first create for yourself. But who ultimately is a target audience for your book?
Ultimately, I would like this to be enjoyed by everybody. It does address social emotional learning themes, but I'm kind of hoping that it finds the right people, but it's also considered maybe incidental by some other people because ultimately it's a quest story. So I hope everybody can enjoy it. But I also wrote this with a non-binary character purposefully because I feel strongly that there need to be more picture books out in the world that with non-binary characters that aren't specifically about gender. I wanted to have a non-binary character in a book where they're just doing their thing, just like every other kid. It's not just specifically them navigating a gender challenge. So I'm hoping that non-binary kids or trans kids or kids who are just questioning their gender might see themselves in that as well, but without that focus on unpacking their gender. They might see themselves, but it's in a different lens when they're often shown the same lens.
Now, you're the author of Ellis On Guard. You actually collaborated with illustrator Nandita Ratan. I wonder if you could talk about the collaborative process. How did that work out?
That's right. So that's actually the biggest difference, I would say, between how picture books and graphic novels work. So in the picture book world, you don't actually collaborate much with the artist directly. So what happens is I write a script as the writer. We write the text. We also have space to write image notes or image descriptions. But we are actually discouraged from using the image descriptions unless it's directly related to how the story needs to go. So if there's an image that I need in order to make the story make sense, I would put that in the image description. Otherwise, I leave free rein to the artist. So what happens is I write this script. It's similar to a comic script, but less detailed. Submit it to a publisher, and then the publisher typically has a number of different artists that they have an established relationship with or are interested in working with. Then that editor reaches out to an artist. I was given a few choices and I loved Nandita's work, so they reached out to Nandita and say, hey, here's the script. Do you want to work on it? And fingers crossed, they say yes. So that script goes to them, and then they work back and forth with the editor on the images. Now, for a writer, that means that I can't be precious, and I'm not, so that's fine. But I think for some writers, that is quite difficult because you're giving your vision to an artist to interpret their own way, which I think is wonderful and exciting, but is difficult for some people. Whereas with graphic novels, particularly in independent graphic novels, which is where I work with Conundrum, it's either, well, Conundrum, most of our artists do everything. They do the writing, they do the lettering, they do the coloring, they do all of it. But even within teams, they're very collaborative. Everybody talks to each other. Everybody works it out. And of course, you have a project manager or an editor at the center of it all. But it's more direct communication. But picture books, yeah, it's totally different. Nandita and I have talked a bit back and forth since, but they keep us very separate during that creation process.
Oh, okay. Beyond this conversation we're having for a podcast, I'm wondering what other plans do you have to promote your book?
We have a book launch scheduled on February 19th at Woozle's bookstore in Halifax. We are also looking at a Toronto book launch, I think sometime in June, because I'm hoping to also make it to TCAF around the same time, but that's not firmed up yet. I've also been invited to the Cork World Book Festival in Ireland. Very excited about that. That's in late April. So other than that, we'll see what comes up and go from there.
Sounds good. Now, we've been talking about Ellis On Guard. I'm wondering if you could talk about any other projects on the go that you're allowed to talk about.
So I actually do have another picture book coming out in about a year with Second Story Press again called The Meadow. I'm really enjoying writing picture books, and I think it's because I like to imagine the images in the background. I might not draw them myself, but that's how I see everything, and I think that partly comes from the graphic novel editing. So I have another picture book coming out with them in about a year. I also have the start of what was going to be a middle grade novel that once I'm done school, I'm doing an education degree right now, I want to go back to, and I'm thinking about turning it into a graphic novel script. So no guarantees there, but I have that bouncing around in the back of my head and on my hard drive and thinking about, pursuing that as a graphic novel script instead of a middle grade novel. So we'll see.
Yeah, sounds like you're going to be busy. So with everything you have on the go today and in the future, where do you recommend that people go online to find out more about you?
Well, you're asking at a great time because I just put up a new website. So you can go to salsawler.com. So that's my website. So I've actually left a lot of social media networks after some changes with Meta and Twitter and whatnot that I won't get into here. But I'm still on LinkedIn, although mostly reluctantly. And I'm on Blue Sky. So folks can find me there as well, just under Sal Sawler.
Very good. Well, Sal, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
Honestly, I think I just want people to keep creating. I know that right now I have moments when I feel a little bit down about AI and all of the things that are happening in the world right now in general. And it can feel kind of futile to create. But I think what I would just say is not about me. I just want to offer, because I know a lot of artists and writers and creative people listen to your podcast. I just want to offer that encouragement to keep creating, because if anything is going to get us through this moment, it's our humanity. And art is exactly what that is. It's just our humanity distilled. So I just want to encourage people to keep creating.
Thanks to Sal for the chat. You can discover more about Sal Sawler online at salsawler.com. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations about creators about making comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media sites, and you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2026.